what's up YouTube? This is Dan the Fix-It Man. Got another quick video here for you. I'm going to show you how to change your rear brake pads on a 2008 Nissan Altima. Now the first thing I like to do is compress the caliper piston here back inside the caliper to allow more space for the new pads. But before we can do that, we got to pop the hood and take a look at the master cylinder fluid level and make sure that when we push that piston back in that we're not going to overflow that master cylinder. Now here's our master cylinder up front. Just take off the lid and set that aside while we compress the caliper piston back in. You can see the fluid level is pretty high, but we've still got enough space to allow us to push those caliper pistons back in without overflowing. If this was higher or up near the top, or if it does get too high as you're doing this, you can use a turkey baster to suck some of that fluid out. You can also just use a paper towel. If you roll it up, the fluid will kind of soak up and wake itself up out of that master cylinder so you don't make a big mess. Okay, now we can push the caliper piston back in. There's a few different methods to doing that. The quickest seems to be this screwdriver method, where you just put it in through the side of the caliper here, and then if you just wedge it, you can see the screwdriver right here coming out. Just wedge it between the edge of the caliper and that brake pad and pull it towards you. You can see how easy that just pushes that caliper piston back in. You can see now there's a lot more room in there for the new brake pad material. Now on most cars I normally just remove this bottom caliper slide pin. In this case, this little suspension component, it's in the way of backing this bolt completely out. So in this case we're just going to loosen and remove the top caliper slide pin, which is a 14 millimeter. Oh, it's really tight. We could just take that slide pin out, and of course I'm going to get that nice and clean and greased up before we put it back in. But because we can't completely remove that lower slide pin without taking apart the suspension crosspiece, I'm just going to leave it in there without removing it at all. As long as this caliper freely moves down, which it does, it doesn't seem like that slide pin is bound up. So since there's no real issues right now, I'm just going to leave that in place. If this did feel like it was binding up or anything, we would take the time to take off this cross piece and clean that up. Actually, if I can peel it, there we go. I'm just exposing the slide pin on the lower part there, and before I put it back together, I'm just going to put a little dab of this sil-glyde grease on there. Just kind of put it around this slide pin and see if that will at least keep that slide pin lubricated so it doesn't bind up on us. I wasn't going to mess with it, but we're able to pull it out enough to grease it up, clean it up and grease it up a little bit, so that looks pretty good. Now we can take out the old brake pads, and you can see they're worn down, not completely gone or metal to metal as they say. And here's this back one. This normally has that little squealer or noise maker. The one on the other side did have that, and it was already scratching on the rotor, so that's how the owner knew we needed to get these changed out. So the brake pad kit that we got from the store came with these replacement caliper retainer clips, and so we'll change those as well. Just come over here and just kind of pry them out. Same thing with this one up here. Just pry them out, get them out of the way. Now, oddly enough, the kit that we bought came with two different sizes of these caliper retention springs. So just make sure you match up the width with the old one, which is these narrow ones here. Before I put these on, it's a good idea to try to clean these off a little bit. It's easier, of course, if you take off the caliper support bracket. But in this case, we're just going to brush them, get some of that dust and crud out of there, and then we can snap them into place, snap these new ones into place. The key is just make sure that they fit in there and that they're nice and flush. Well, on this one, I guess I was mistaken. They only come with the noisemaker on the back of these brake pads. It's that little squealer or metal squealer. That's only one side, not for both. So we'll go ahead and get this put back together. Okay, so on these replacement pads, something else that I noticed, it's a little bit different. It's got these two little metal pieces that stick out on this pad. Now, I already did the other side. I didn't even notice this, but on the other side, the inboard pad is the one with the noisemaker on it. And then this one, I just double checked, this is the one that goes on the outside that's got the little hole in the shim here. I just double checked here with these two little metal things that stick out, and I just put it into the caliper, and I noticed that it doesn't work with this outside edge of the caliper. So this one here will have to go on the inboard pad. So kind of a weird thing. You know, I usually wouldn't even hardly notice that, but I would have, of course, run into an issue with these little metal things sticking out because it wouldn't have allowed this to seat properly on there. So a little bit of grease on the back of the pad and a little bit in these ends here as well. This is that same sil-glyde grease, and just make sure you don't get any on the front surface of the pad. So this will be our inboard pad, and that'll just slide into place right over here. There we go. And same thing with the outside pad. Go ahead and put some of this grease on there. Spread that around, and a good amount in the ends here as well, where it rides inside these little metal retainer clips. And just press that into place, just like so. I also noticed the caliper boot here is bulged out a little bit. So I'm just gonna clean it up a little bit by putting a little bit of that sil-glyde grease on there as well, and just kind of slowly push that boot back in. This boot, if you can push it back in, it's less likely to catch that edge of the pad or break down the road. And then you can just tilt the caliper back up. Just take note of that boot, make sure it's not rubbing anything on the pad. And then this upper boot here between the slide pin, just make sure that that doesn't get crushed either. And then lastly, before we put in this other slide pin, just put a little bit of grease on that as well, just to keep it lubed up as it's supposed to be and properly moving. And we can put that into place up here in the top. And we can tighten that down with that 14 millimeter. And that's pretty much everything. Just remember to step on the brake pedal once or twice to push the caliper piston back out and adjust these pads properly against the rotor where they need to be. And go ahead and top off the master cylinder as well. I hope you liked the video. Please give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you don't mind. That does help me out. I will put a link in the video to this sil-glyde grease where you can buy that on Amazon, and I will also put a link in the description to my website where you can look for some of the other tools and parts that I use quite often as well. But thanks so much for watching, and good luck.